Star Citizen being a game that's in open development, we get to witness stages of the project that normally remain sealed behind closed doors, and that includes the whole process of try and error, from which the developers at CIG get to gauge which feature works fine, needs improvement, or has to get blasted into oblivion. People of the verse, hello and welcome to the channel. I am the Eradicator, and today I will review with you 5 such features that made it to the roadmap, were eventually released, and got cancelled. Number 5. Scramble Races, released in Alpha 3.2, cancelled in Alpha 3.9. There once was a time in which racing was an actual feature of the verse and not an afterthought that relied on players for emergent gameplay. The worst part was that, in my opinion at least, they were fun, but for a different reason, no one played them, which led CIG to just simply remove them from the verse. And there were 2 main flaws to Scramble Races in my opinion. The first one was that they just didn't pay enough. I mean, once you clicked on accept, you had to get to your destination, which obviously took time, and then once you would arrive, you would have to wait for other participants to arrive, which in theory could take up to 20 minutes. And then if someone's shown up, which only ever happened twice to me, you'll either get to fly or drive through an obstacle course, depending on whether you are in space or on a planetary surface. Now, the first one to bring a flare to the finish line would then win the race, and of course, racers were encouraged to grab that flare by any means necessary, which of course involved, as you may have guessed, a little bit of eradication. So, what went wrong, I hear you ask? Well, imagine that after all that trouble you ended up winning the race. Well, you were handed the hefty sum of 1500 Alpha UEC. Now, you know why no one bothered racing. I mean, had CIG multiplied the reward by 20 or 50, there would have been races all the time, but they didn't. So let's hope that they learned from their mistake and that the Grim X race course is going to be a little bit more exciting. Number 4. System Heat, introduced in Alpha 3.5 and phased out in Alpha 3.7. To be clear, Heat was not introduced in the verse in Alpha 3.5. Instead, the patch featured some changes regarding Heat that were rather unpopular, to put it mildly, and the main point that crystallized player anger was by far how it affected content travel. Take a trip from Crusader to ArcCorp, for example. Such a journey should be taking only a few minutes, but in the days of Star Citizen Alpha 3.5, it could take over an hour. The reason was that traveling in Quantum for a long time made our ship's content drives overheat. Cooldowns took a ridiculously long time. It bugged the star map, made our control markers disappear, and generated a fair share of rage thread on the spectrum, as you might imagine. There were, of course, workarounds that were found by players over time, such as overclocking ship components, or even more surprising, Jack Axton even told me that leaving the pilot's seat just before entering content travel would cancel the overheating effect, which was ridiculous, and eventually everyone did it, so CIG understood that the feature didn't win the backers' hearts and reversed course to the travel mode that we have today. Number 3. Expanding delivery missions to ArcCorp, introduced in Alpha 3.5, cancelled in Alpha 3.9. This removal is something I can't comprehend. More than just adding deliveries to ArcCorp, this feature brought maturity to a delivery gameplay that truly became a viable alternative to trading at a time when server stability was already a concern. More options became available for aspiring space delivery boys and girls, who then were able to stock dozens of high-paying missions worth up 9,000 Alpha UEC, and with enough coordination, if you made multiple pickups and drop-offs at the same time and the same area, you could make nearly 100,000 Alpha UEC an hour. And what made those missions great was just not the money, but the immersion that they gave and the change of pace they offered compared to regular tradings, as pickups or deliveries would often take place at locations that traders seemed to avoid, like Magda, for example. I also really enjoyed trying to find the most effective way to execute and complete multiple city deliveries. For example, I found out that it is possible to load and unload 3 boxes in the metro before it leaves. That allowed me to deliver up to 3 boxes at the Lorville gates. I also liked hiding boxes in the hangars. They look like they're part of the decor and no one took them away. These were fun times that CIG took away in Alpha 3.9 for the current delivery missions that are just not worth the money for the time invested. What a waste. Number 2. The Hover Mode, introduced in Alpha 3.6 and cancelled in Alpha 3.7. The main purpose of Star Citizen Alpha 3.6's hover mode, or VTOL mode, was to prevent players from using ships as flying turrets that would magically float in the atmosphere, which quite frankly was indeed unrealistic, and so the idea was that in atmosphere below a certain speed and altitude, ships would automatically engage in a vertical takeoff and landing mode, or VTOL mode, that would make ships fly more like helicopters instead of planes. The problem was that this particular flight model was far different from what players had been used to until then, and a lot of players had problems adapting to VTOL mode. I personally enjoyed it very much, but to be perfectly honest here, it was an acquired taste. I too found it very frustrating to use, and it took me several weeks of restless effort to eventually get to understand how it worked and master it, and once it was the case, I did find the flight model satisfying, immersive, and I was able to perform beautiful smooth landings I was proud to show on videos. In my opinion, what doomed the hover mode was the lack of 3D landing radar, which made it very difficult to land at Lorville and Area 18. There was definitely a lot of players who lost their ships and their precious cargo inside, resulting in the loss of millions and millions of Alpha UEC. Once again, I'm afraid that the hover mode debacle is a typical case of CIG not being fully aware of how backers play the game, and I think that if they had made landing easier from the start, I am sure that the VTOL mode would have been accepted much better overall. And number 1, Restricted Area Rework, introduced in Alpha 3.10, cancelled in Alpha 3.12. It really seems that CIG are struggling to find the right formula as far as restricted areas go. First introduced in Alpha 3.3 when Hurston and Lorville was released, this principle featured huge glowing blobs that surrounded the city except for a tiny shaft around the hangar area. It was ugly, resource-hungry, and generated a lot of complaints, probably because it insta-killed you if you touched it one bit. Then it was removed and replaced by an autopilot that had a tendency to crash your ship to the surface. Not ideal either. As of Alpha 3.10, the horrible autopilot is not gone yet, but is now paired with splines that are supposed to safely guide you in and out of the restricted area, a bit like a virtual corridor generated by the ATC to guide your path. I didn't mind them. I mean, after all, augmented reality is already everywhere in the verse, and so they were not immersion breaking to me, but the overall feedback was negative, and a lot of players saw them as being unnecessary and restrictive. I actually believe that this is a fair point. I don't see what could prevent CIG from completely removing them and replacing no-fly zones with hefty fines and annoying sound alarms. It would maintain the idea of restricted areas while discouraging people from entering them. And that's it for this top 5 video about release roadmap features that got cancelled. Which one did you dislike or miss the most? I personally hated that heat update, and I thought it was very restrictive and was just completely bugged. Good riddance. But I really missed the VTOL mode. I mean, VTOL was first reintroduced in Alpha 3.10 with the current flight model that we have. However, it just doesn't fly the same, and I never use it. Anyway guys, it is now time to wrap this video. A special thanks to all of my patrons and Jom members for going the extra mile to support this channel. Also, we're giving away a Super Hornet with LTI on Discord, so you may want to check that out if you are eligible. Thank you very much for watching. This is the Eradicator, and I'll see you guys later. This video is brought to you by the people who support this channel on Patreon and via the join button as well. Supporters of the channel get access to lots of cool perks such as access to my private Discord, your question answered in the show, you get to know when I'm going to play, and also you get to have a chance to influence the editorial line of the channel. Any help is appreciated, starts at just $1 a month. Thank you very much for watching. This is the Eradicator, and I'll see you guys later.